Have you ever slowly disappeared from people's lives? Without a fight, without an explanation, without a dramatic goodbye, one day you just stopped replying as fast. You avoided gatherings, you limited conversations, and before anyone noticed, you had emotionally stepped back from almost everyone. Maybe you told yourself, I just need peace. Maybe you thought, I'm tired of people. But deep down, there was a more complicated question. Why does connection sometimes feel heavier than loneliness? Today we're talking about the psychology of people who cut off others, limit their relationships, and distance themselves from their social world, not to judge them, not to label them as cold or arrogant, but to understand what is really happening beneath the surface. Because most of the time, when someone disconnects, they're not rejecting people, they're protecting themselves. First, it's important to separate healthy solitude from emotional withdrawal. Some people are naturally introverted. They recharge alone, they prefer a small circle. That's not a problem, it's personality. But when someone begins cutting people off out of hurt, fear, or exhaustion, that's different. That psychological protection, one of the most common reasons people distance themselves, is emotional overload. Some individuals are highly sensitive. They process tone, facial expressions, small changes in behavior, everything. They replay conversations in their minds. They feel rejection deeply, even when it's subtle. Over time, this constant emotional processing becomes exhausting. Imagine your nervous system like a sound system turned up too high. Every comment feels loud. Every disagreement feels intense. Social environments become draining instead of energizing. So, what happens? Withdrawal becomes a coping strategy. Silence becomes relief. Distance becomes rest, not because they don't care, but because they feel too much. Another powerful factor is attachment style. Our early relationships shape how we connect as adults. People with avoidant attachment often learned early that depending on others was unsafe or disappointing. Maybe their emotions were ignored. Maybe vulnerability led to rejection. As adults, closeness can unconsciously trigger anxiety. When relationships start to deepen, they feel exposed. So they pull back. If someone gets too close, they create space. If a conversation becomes emotional, they shut down. It's not that they lack feelings. It's that intimacy activates fear. For others, withdrawal comes after repeated relational trauma, betrayal, manipulation, constant criticism, being misunderstood. After enough pain, the brain creates a simple rule. Isolation is safer than disappointment. Depression is another major reason people cut off their social world. When someone feels hopeless, empty, or emotionally numb, they often believe they are a burden. They think, I'll bring everyone down, or no one wants to deal with me. Shame pushes them into silence. Instead of asking for support, they disappear before anyone can reject them. It feels less painful to withdraw voluntarily than to risk feeling unwanted. But isolation can deepen depression, creating a cycle. They feel low, they withdraw, they feel lonelier, they withdraw more. Burnout and chronic stress also play a big role. When someone has been in survival mode, dealing with work pressure, family problems, financial stress, their emotional battery drains. Social interaction requires energy. Listening requires energy, caring requires energy. If the nervous system is exhausted, even simple conversations feel overwhelming, so they start saying no. They stop explaining themselves, they reduce contact. This isn't always about dislike, sometimes it's about recovery. Another psychological pattern behind cutting people off is poor boundary development. Some people grow up learning to please others. They overgive, they say yes when they want to say no. They tolerate disrespect to avoid conflict. Eventually, resentment builds. But instead of gradually setting healthy boundaries, they swing to the opposite extreme. They don't say, I need space. They disappear. Silence becomes their boundary. From the outside, it may look dramatic. But internally, it feels like the only way to regain control. Distrust also shapes social withdrawal. If someone has experienced betrayal repeatedly, their brain starts generalizing. One betrayal becomes people can't be trusted. One abandonment becomes everyone leaves. The brain's primary job is protection, so it reduces exposure to potential threats, including emotional ones. The problem is that while isolation reduces risk, it also reduces opportunities for safe connection and healing. Self-worth plays a quiet but powerful role too. Some people withdraw because they feel fundamentally different or misunderstood. They may feel invisible in conversations, unheard in relationships, or emotionally out of place. After repeated experiences of not feeling seen, they conclude it's easier to be alone than to feel alone in a room full of people. In this case, cutting people off is not about superiority. It's about protecting fragile self-esteem. But here's something important: not all distancing is unhealthy. As people mature, they often become more selective. They realize not everyone deserves access to their energy. They let go of toxic, one-sided, or draining relationships. Healthy detachment says, I respect myself enough to choose carefully. Emotional shutdown says, I'm safer if no one gets close. The difference is motivation. Is the distance coming from clarity or from fear? The nervous system response known as freeze can also explain withdrawal. When someone feels emotionally threatened, criticized, overwhelmed, or overstimulated, the body may shut down. Instead of fighting or fleeing, it freezes. Chronic freeze can look like indifference, like emotional numbness, like social disinterest. But underneath, it's often unresolved stress. In today's digital world, withdrawal has become easier than ever. You can mute someone, unfollow them, leave messages unanswered. No confrontation, no explanation. Just quiet disappearance. Technology allows emotional distance without physical distance. But it can also mask loneliness, so how can someone know if their withdrawal is healthy or harmful? Ask yourself, do I feel peaceful alone or tense? Am I resting or avoiding? Do I still have at least one safe connection? If someone supportive reached out, would I allow it? Healthy solitude feels grounding. Defensive isolation feels rigid and guarded. If you recognize yourself in this pattern, change doesn't mean becoming socially outgoing overnight. It means learning safe reconnection. Start small. One honest message. One clear boundary. One emotionally safe person. Reconnection is not about having many relationships. It's about having meaningful ones, and if someone in your life has withdrawn, pushing them rarely works. Shaming them doesn't help. Calling them cold or selfish only deepens the wall. What helps is consistency, gentle presence, clear communication. Sometimes the most healing message is simple: I'm here, no pressure. People who cut others off are not always rejecting the world. Sometimes they are overwhelmed, sometimes they are exhausted. Sometimes they are protecting old wounds, sometimes they are learning self-respect. Human behavior is layered, so instead of asking, what is wrong with me? Ask, what am I protecting? Am I seeking peace or hiding from pain? Because the goal isn't to never withdraw. The goal is to learn how to step back when needed, without disappearing from your own life.